Gadgetnate, aka this guy, interviewed a random person every single day for 5 years. He asked them about Americans going back to the moon, what they thought about it, and whether they even knew. And the responses weren't just interesting, they were varied and all across the board.
It's a great idea. That's pretty cool.
NASA's proven to lie.
Oh.
Their data is falsified.
If you could, would you take a trip to space?
No.
No?
Not at all.
Why not?
Because I'm not batshit crazy. I ain't gonna even drop out of an airplane.
This was all a part of his project, Countdown to the Moon. And I decided to turn the tables on him and interview him about his experience in speaking to the public about the moon landing. He has some great insights and thoughts to share, so here's the full interview. Nate, thanks for talking to me today. Can you tell me a little bit about your Countdown to the Moon project?
Well, back in 2019, NASA had an associate administrator, Doug Laverio, who had a lapel pin counting down the days to the end of 2024 to kind of keep him and the team focused on achieving that date to actually get the next people on the moon. And he was going around NASA selecting a hero of the day because it was at the time it was called the Human Exploration Operations Directorate. And some neurons fired in a certain way. And I was like, hey, I'll do a similar type project and I'll just interview a regular everyday person. My original thought was interview non-space people, just people who had nothing or interest in space. And then, after going through a lot of interviews where it's, hey, do you know NASA's going back to the moon? No. What do you think about it? I don't. Where do you think humanity's going? Not sure. That type of thing. And also COVID really changed a lot of things. Originally, when I started the project in December 2019, COVID wasn't even a word in the news cycle. And having an interview in person was doable, if not challenging. But that March, we had the lockdowns, and doing interviews in person, going up to random people for any reason was really suspect. But once you start asking him about the moon, that probably tips the scales a little.
So I realize you're not trying to sell him something.
Now, or give them something, or take something from them. That's and so I started interviewing people online, and then I just pretty much started interviewing anybody and everybody. And I started 1,840 days to go, and now I have 150 days. So
wow,
that means I've done 1,000. What is it? Come on, public math. Let's do it. 1,690 interviews. Yeah,
that is crazy. Yeah. Absolutely crazy, and without missing a single day.
Without missing a single day. Some days have been really close, but.
Do you think that any part of you will miss this when you're done?
I think for sure. I am looking forward to the freedom of not having sort of this daily thing that I put on myself.
Yeah.
Early on in the project, it may not have been that big a deal to miss a day, but being within 150 days of the end, missing a day now means breaking a big streak. And
right.
I've only been doing Duolingo for the past 54 days, and breaking that streak would be difficult. It would be painful. So you could just imagine how breaking the countdown to the moon streak would be. So.
Yeah, I would be incredibly stressed out every
I would, yeah. Try to do it as early as you can. Try to do it 30 minutes past midnight, and boom, you get the rest of the day free. You're like, not only do I not need to interview somebody, but I can't. I have to wait until tomorrow.
That is nice. Well, that's a nice thing too, because you haven't done multiple interviews in a day, right? You've actually stuck to just one a day, which I think is a very cool aspect, challenging aspect to do for 3 years.
5
years.
Yeah, because it's 2019, and so by the end of this year, it's been 5 years plus most of a month. Yeah.
Is there? Do you feel like doing that consistently every single day? Did that impact your discipline at all, or do you feel like that hadn't changed? I feel like the consistency of doing anything every single day for that long with this purpose and something that's challenging, something you have to go out of your way for. I just always wonder, did that impact the way you view other things? Did you grow from this in some other way in your life?
I think in order to do the everyday thing, I've had to really focus on this one thing, which means maybe not pursuing a lot of those other things that I want to do. And so I have since essentially had to sacrifice everything to do this one thing. But I'm thinking that after the project's over with, I would have a little bit more faith in myself and realizing that if I really want to, I could. And I feel like at that point, I'll be able to roll into something else that maybe will be more meaningful.
Gotcha. Fair enough. Do you have any idea what that might be? Any thoughts?
I mean, I would like to invent something, create something, discover something, make some type of. I mean, I would like to be able to think of ideas and then just make them appear.
Mm.
And I think having some skills to actually make that happen would be key. And I think, diligent, systematic effort on developing those skills, that would be possible.
Nice.
Like one thing I'm interested in right now is automated storage and retrieval systems. So we're renting a house down here in League City, and in our closet, it's a one-story house, and in our closet there's this huge empty space above where the clothes are, and I foresee building some type of device that will automatically put away stuff and retrieve things.
Oh, that's nice.
And so I'd like to just be able to have like the parts and the skills to go, that'd be cool, snap, 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 and then have it working.
You definitely seem to have an inventor mindset. I feel like every time I'm talking to you, you're like, what if this or what if that? Or, I say one sentence, you're like, what if this thing happened? And you can see it all like being pieced together in your mind every single time, a new conversation happens. I feel like you have another kind of spark. So it seems more like it comes naturally to you.
Yeah, I think part of the frustration is that it seems to stay in the mind. To somehow tease it out of reality and make it actually so somebody else can see it.
Yeah.
And one of the big challenges is in your mind, everything works perfectly. It's really awesome. You don't have to deal with the problems. You can immediately go to that end result vision. Whenever you're dealing with reality or trying to share that vision with somebody else, it's a lot of frustration. You have to, it requires a skill. So
Yeah,
I
definitely
hope to develop that skill.
Yeah, I definitely understand the ideas thing. I feel like even with YouTube videos, there's no shortage of ideas, but like focusing on one thing and just getting that one thing done. Yeah, that's very tough. And then the actual hurdles of creating what's in your mind. So I definitely agree with you there.
Absolutely. And then, when you create it in reality, it's not going to be as cool. And, you really have to iterate on it and keep working on it to make it cool.
Yeah.
And, that's not fun. It's a lot more fun.
It's work. Yeah.
It's work.
Yeah.
It's work. So hopefully after Countdown to the Moon or even before that, start really investing more in that area.
That'd be nice. That's cool. One of the things I noticed, so followed you out just now, getting your Countdown to the Moon interview today, which I'm glad you got that out of the way before we chatted. All right, Nate is working on getting his Countdown to the Moon interview. We'll see how this goes once the master at work.
Yeah.
All right, Nate, what's the verdict on the first try?
It didn't work out, but we did have a long conversation. So, one of the goals of this project is to meet people. Definitely did that. We got to talk to Tyler, learned a little bit about some of the questions he had about NASA and some of the doubts he has and wondering why we haven't gone to the moon again. And then also a lot about his job. It's like the distribution of labor between him and his co-workers, as well as management's understanding and appreciation of his job and how all that works out. It's quite interesting. And at the end of the day, it goes to show you that we're all just people dealing with our stuff.
It's awesome.
And occasionally you get interrupted by some random guy going, can you tell me what you think about going to the moon? And you're like, oh.
It sounded like you guys had a nice combo, though.
It was good.
I'm always really impressed with how people react, because I think I have a natural tendency towards being a little more guarded with people. Like I would be nervous to go up to somebody in case they reacted negatively or whatever. But I've seen so many times where either you got an interview or you didn't get an interview, but then you sat talking with the individual. And even just now, right, you sat talking to this guy maybe 20, 30 minutes, having a good conversation and making like a human connection. So I was curious your thoughts on that. Did any of this like change how you view kind of people around, or Joe's have kind of positive mindset? Anything that this made you think of?
I would say with this project, I've had to talk to a wide range of people. And the thing that really impresses me is how intelligent and smart and generous people are, largely. I mean, I think whenever you ask people about the future and what it'd take to get there, they have answers. And if you ask them who you're voting for or what your cable company is going to be, or, your telephone company, that all drives a certain level of thinking. And I think whenever you look at society and sort of the problems that we have and interactions between people, I think largely is because we're not asking ourselves or each other meaningful questions. And essentially, we're just trying to manipulate each other into taking certain actions. And I think one thing with this project is I have my own views about space, and I have my own views about what's real and not real, and what we should believe in and not believe in, and what's valuable and what's not valuable. But with this project, I've really tried to become invisible and to just let the other person fill the space. A lot of times that has me nodding and stuff that I don't agree to and listening to things that I would argue against. But I really want to kind of leave a space for people to like occupy and to try to approach them from a place of curiosity and from a place of understanding. And
Gotcha.
so
That's wonderful.
that's
that's like inspirational.
I think
Yeah.
a lot of people I talk to, their initial thing is, I just imagine, I project onto them what I would imagine I would feel, which would be, what are they trying to sell me? What are they trying to get me to do? What are they trying to take away from me? Well, what's their purpose? And I don't think I think we live in an age where we're constantly being bombarded by people who strictly want to get something from us that has nothing to do with us. Our money, our vote, our choice. But they're really not interested in us as human beings. And I tried to bring to this project a real genuine curiosity and trying to understand how is this person seeing the world and processing the world, and what kind of information led them to this point, and what are the fears and issues that they're dealing with, and sometimes have really long discussions and get into that. And other days, frankly, the discussions are a lot more abbreviated because I'm just trying to keep from breaking my streak. So
Fair enough. Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because two big takeaways that I take from watching you. First of all, I'm impressed that you have this ability to go up and talk to people like that. Like, you have the courage to do that. But two things I've noticed in the way people react to you after you've already explained what you're looking for is, one, people are genuinely friendly. That's a good reminder. It's easy to forget that when you kind of stop going out into the world as much. And two is that a main takeaway is that it feels like people want to be heard, right? Like, I think that in a lot of ways, when you go up to them, you give them an opportunity to have a voice and to share their opinion. That's something that I think we all kind of desperately want to some degree. And probably your average person doesn't get a lot of time to do that and feel like they're heard. So to be like, I want to interview you, like, probably makes them feel like in a special place, right? Like, I think that's a really nice part of your project, is that people get to be heard that maybe normally wouldn't be.
yeah, and it is true. I think people have a lot to say whenever they have a place to say it.
Yeah. Anything that surprised you in terms of people's answers? Any ones that come to mind?
What do you think about us going to the moon? One person said, well, the government wastes money on all sorts of things. Might as well waste money on something inspirational.
Oh, it's like positive and negative.
Sure. It's like a backhanded compliment type thing, right?
I love that.
It really scares me, the number of people that don't think that humanity has a future. And I really think that so many things are like self-fulfilling prophecies. I mean, the classic example is about, the strength of a bank, right? If the bank never has enough money on hand to fulfill all of its account holders, and if people feel like they're not going to be able to go to the bank and get the money out, then you have a run on the bank and the bank collapses, right? And if people feel like the bank's going to be around, they don't do that. They gladly put money in and leave it there. And I think, you have so many things that are like self-fulfilling prophecies. Like, if you don't believe that we're going to have to live here 100 years, 200 years, 300 years in the future, you're like, let's just trash and use up the environment. We're not going to be here anyway. Might as well use it all. If you don't feel like you're going to have a retirement, you're like, why should I save? Why should I care about my health? And why should I work on having like a stable society? And so it really concerns me that there are huge institutions that are based upon the world ending. Like that is literally like the bedrock on which they're built. This whole concept that there is an end and there's nothing you could do about it. And I feel like that in some ways leads to negative behaviors on a lot of people's parts that ultimately brings about the very end that they say is unavoidable. It's like one of these Greek tragedies, right? Where there's some prophecy about this thing happening and the guy's like, oh, I can't have that happen. And so he goes and does all these things that he wouldn't have done anyway that leads to that very outcome.
I see. Fair enough. And so you get the impression that a lot of people are in that mindset.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are hoping that the world ends, which is like sad, I think. A lot of people feel like all the problems of the world are beyond them. And, it's just like, they may be beyond an individual, but there's definitely sets of behaviors that if they were embraced by large numbers of people would lead to a better world. There's sets of behaviors that are embraced by people that lead to a worse world. And anyway, so.
Interesting. Well, now I'm sad.
Yeah. But there's a lot of people, there's some people that, I over the course of this project, I'm like, what do you think about the future of humanity? Where do you see humanity in 500 years? Where do you see humanity in 200 years? Do you think the future is better or worse? I've asked that question in a variety of ways. And, some people think that we could easily be at the next star system in 200 years, and that we'll fully develop the solar system. And also kind of the interesting thing to me, early on in my project, I interviewed one person. I'm like, what do you think about us going back to the moon? And they're like, we shouldn't go to the moon. We've messed up the Earth. We shouldn't mess up the moon too. Now, I think this is very interesting because I wonder what messing up the moon looks like. Like pollution and all that, I think in context of its harm on life. Like, you go and you put stuff into a lake and it kills all the vegetation and fish. And clearly bad, right? But if you go and mine in an airless, dead world to get resources, how is that hurting that world? And especially if doing that is the alternative to actually doing it where you have the biosphere, like living. So I feel
like the moon is probably one that's very tied to people here too, right? It's within our sights. It's not something that's kind of out of sight. Because, I feel like I've also read companies that want to put like advertisements on the moon and this on the moon, things that be visible from Earth. And even though, I don't see that happening like, at least anytime soon, that to me feels like, oh my gosh, the ultimate billboard, So maybe that's that it's more connected, I think, more directly to Earth as well. I wonder.
But how would you feel if you looked up at the moon and you saw evidence, not an advertisement, but evidence that there were humans living on the moon, like some type of facility that you could just barely make out, some lights? Would that excite you or would that make you sad?
I think it depends. I guess it depends how it's done, right? Like I think if it's done in a way that's just to kind of exploit it for profit versus are we there to try to discover something? Are we being cautious? Are we walking softly? Like there's that kind of sense. It depends on the purpose, right? If I see, I tend to be a little more geared towards, like, for example, if it was a NASA or government thing that's purely for like scientific endeavor and research, versus we're going to drill into this thing till there's nothing left because we can pull X mineral out, right? So I think that's more how I feel about it. But yeah. What was I going to say about the moon specifically? Yeah, I don't know. How do you feel? Do you make a distinction between those, or for you is it kind of, it's a free-for-all? If there's activity, it's a good thing.
I would say there's activity is a good thing. I would say capitalism definitely sometimes has its downside and short-sightedness. But in terms of its engine to produce efficiencies and to, even if you look at these mics and this table and, the iPhones and things like this, I mean, these are all things that were created by groups of people putting together companies that were trying to make a better product at a cheaper cost than other companies. And that competition, has really been a driver of innovation and invention and an improvement to the quality of our lives in many ways. And there's lots of ways where it kind of falls short, especially if you look at medical care and look at the way the effects on the environment and stuff. There's definitely opportunities for improvement. But I think, it's better for us to be a rich society, rich in resources and capabilities and leisure and information with some of these down things than living in a much poorer society where, we're more of a victim of our environment and less of, I think we don't want to give up our capabilities as humanity. We want to increase our wisdom. And that should be kind of our focus. We should figure out some way to hold companies and people more accountable for their actions and effects. We should drive society that values people looking at the totality of their impact and not just how can they get the best profit this quarter in this kind of like arbitrary way. And a lot of that's going to be us making better purchasing decisions and better decisions on what we invest in and better decisions on, who we work for and what we do and that type of thing. So
I definitely agree with you there as far as, needing to have more accountability and voting with our dollar and all that good stuff. Yeah, I definitely agree. One of the things about the moon, it reminded me was I have a friend who's a researcher, and she was talking about just like human activity on the moon in general, not commercial versus government versus whatever. But her thing is, analyzing all of these things, the geology, the mineral makeup, whatever. And she's like, we have X amount of water on the moon, and when we get up there, we're going to drink it. She's like, this thing that's like, however many billions of years old and this and that and all this information in there. What we're going to do, we're going to drink it. So I thought that was an interesting perspective because it was a scientific person, somebody very much into space exploration in general. But the sense of like, oh, we're wasting this thing that could tell us a lot of information by just like utilizing it like anything else, which I don't know. I thought was kind of an interesting thought.
Yeah, I know. I mean, how do you view these frozen ice deposits? Do you view them as just a resource, or do you view them as some type of preservation of? Presumably these accumulated over millions and billions of years, and in that time, you would think that it actually captured different evidence of activity in this volume of space that both the Earth and the Moon's traveling through, and you could even imagine that maybe we had an asteroid that hit the Earth hard enough to throw up a big enough chunk that some of that material may have actually ended up preserved in that part of the moon.
Right.
It's like, I definitely think we should analyze what we get out of there, try to, before we go and turn it into pee and and rocket fuel.
Yeah,
we should see if it has some secrets to tell us.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, I think that plays into the research over just going and utilizing it too, right? Like being smart about maybe the order of operations and what is allowed or not allowed, and yeah. Anyway, it's a lot of questions we're gonna have to answer, I guess, moving forward.
Yeah, you wonder, some of these water deposits are in these permanently shadowed craters near the poles of the moon. And you got to imagine that the rim of those craters is very important for protecting it. I could just see, having some like cave in and then suddenly you're exposed to the radiation of the sun and just like, evaporates. You're like, ah!
No. Or we erect a apartment complex and we're like, wait a minute, it's a bad spot for it.
Yeah.
All right. I had a couple of questions I wanted to ask you. These are super well researched, unique questions. I don't think you've ever heard any of these before.
What is your name?
Uh, close. Would you go to the moon? Sorry. Would you go? Would you be willing to go to space?
Yes, I feel like David Crockett in the Alamo, where like one of the versions, he's like, if I was just a senator from Tennessee, I would slip over those lines, head back to my thing. But since I'm Davy Crockett, king of the wild frontier, I have to stay here. So I feel like since I'm Nathan Price, the countdown to the moon guy, I have to go.
You have to go. And how far would you go?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't mind being a Martian colonist. I'd like to see humanity go forth, and I would like to be on the front lines of that.
Interesting. Also, let the record show these questions are all questions that Nathan asks in his interviews that I'm stealing right now, and I'm curious to hear what your answers are. That's why. Martian colonist. So would you want to bring your family? You going out there on your own? Are they down?
My wife is down. My kids to stay back.
Interesting.
Yeah, my wife would go with me. Of course, she says that right now because it's all theoretical.
Yeah.
But I just see it be like waiting for like the bullet over there at Kima.
That's true,
and she's like, "Yeah,
she
sure."
can't lose by going like, "Yeah, of course, no problem, honey."
Of course, honey. I mean,
as long as we go to Hawaii this year,
that's right.
Like, we'll make a trade.
We'll do your Mars thing as long as I get to go wherever I want to every single year until then.
Yeah.
So no, there's different ways to milk it for sure. But I get the sense that she wants to be genuine about going. But at the same token, there's a very big difference between sitting here and talking. I mean, like we don't go camping, right? And this would be like the extremest camping experience ever.
Yes. Well, yeah, so I guess this is my next question. What's the appeal? Is it being one of the first? Is it, what's the appeal for you personally?
For me personally, definitely be a unique experience.
That's for sure.
I think, sort of voting with your feet, if you will. I think humanity should push forth into the universe. We should take what appears to be a dead and lifeless universe and go and spread forth our life and the life of the earth throughout the universe. Like we should be sending seed ships and colony ships and all sorts of things. And that panspermia theory that life originated from one place and spread to other places, we should make that true. Mm-hmm. So, do
you have any concern of other places already having life and getting a negative interaction with life that we're sending out?
I would like to say that in any jungle, you already have negative interactions. I mean, it's like the nature is the most inhumane killing field that ever existed. It's not a bunch of kitties out there in the jungle. It's, life versus life. It's, every bit of the ecosystem trying to outdo every other bit of the ecosystem. So I would say our life going forth and having negative interaction, who's to say that negative interaction isn't what protects that life from some other hostile life from some other part of the universe? It's really difficult to say what the interaction is going to be.
Yeah.
But no, I have no concerns. Life is constantly being created and destroyed. It's it's messy.
Interesting. I would think there would be like a sense of like loss for, let's say we like ended up inadvertently killing something on another planet before we even knew it was there, right? In terms of like understanding that knowledge, and same reason we like sterilize probes and things like that as best we can anyway.
Yeah. I tend to think that life develops to exist in an environment that it developed in. Like the life that's on Europa is better at living on Europa than any other life. And so I would be very amazed if there was life from Earth that would be
that's the thing that's thriving. Yeah, that's like, a good point.
Oh my gosh, I'm on Europa. I'm home. If that happened, let's just say that it didn't originate from there. It's kind of even a more interesting. on Mars was like a 25 and a half hour day, right? And you put people in completely isolated areas and they start living on a 25-hour cycle is what I hear, which is, I think is kind of
Adjust right to it.
think that, maybe for some reason we're naturally adapted to a 25-hour day. Like, what does that mean?
That's why I'm tired all the time. It's just like that one. I was going to lay that 1 hour.
Yeah, that 1.5 hour. Gee whiz. Yeah, those Martian scientists that are like, having to set their clock and they're waking up at weird times all the time. They all look so alive and have purpose and they're happy.
Oh, no. That's hilarious.
The rest of us are stuck with this inhumane 24-hour day. Time for us to go home.
All right. Next question. You're basically on trial right now.
I understand.
These are good answers, though.
That's as a married man, I'm used to this experience.
I've heard you ask these questions so many times. It's so refreshing to hear your answer. It's nice to hear your responses. In 200 years, how do you think humanity will look back on us right now?
Whenever we look back 200 years, I mean, what do you remember from 200 years ago? Like, if you were to think back to 1824, what do you know about 1824?
Yeah, I just assume it was more awful.
More awful. They didn't have AC or microwaves.
Yeah, that's true.
They didn't have electric lighting. They probably had a better appreciation of stars than we did. I mean, go out, like, whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa. We go out and we go, is that it's a plane. No, it's a satellite. Yeah. I 200 years from now, I see the thing is when you're living through a time, you always think it's the most pivotal time ever. Like you think this time is important, right? But once the time's passed, it's no longer important. It's a done deal. Right. People won't care about 200 years ago. We'll be completely forgotten in 200 years. Nobody, I mean, I doubt anybody even knows like Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk or anything like that. I mean, Elon creates Starship, goes and colonizes Mars, and it's called New Muskville. People might be like, what's this New Muskville?
Muskville. As if convincing people to move to Mars wasn't hard enough. You got Muskville.
Muskville. Yeah.
I gotta work out that one.
I think largely we don't care about our ancestors. We might care about our parents, but anything beyond that, I think
we have somewhat of a sense of social progress with things like people's rights or certainly with technology as well.
It's funny though, despite having a lot of improvements in social progress, that doesn't tend to satisfy people. They still see kind of like the injustices in the world and focus on that as opposed to the progress that's been made so far. It's like, and in some ways that's kind of justified, right? It's like, oh great, we're less wrong than we used to be, but we are less wrong than we used to be. So that's kind of good, Yeah. We need to keep going forward So
I think there's that sense, right? Like, I guess for me, like I always think of any significant time in the past would be like, yeah, that'd probably be worse to live in. That would be a lot worse, right? Like, in general, in terms of, yeah. But do you think that'll be the same going forward? You look back at 2024 and be like, I can't believe they were living like that and doing these things. And
we've gotten a lot more leisure over the past few decades than I think we've ever had. A lot of time just to sit around and do nothing. We've become more and more superfluous to the world that we live in. Also, the world's become more and more mysterious. Back during, like the 70s and 80s, the technologies that we used, like tape recorders and TVs and, computing machines, they were still, you could still take them apart, put them together, create them, see the inner workings of them. But like this iPhone, it's a completely magical device. Like you can't give this to a kid and then expect them to be able to build like a iPhone, but you can give them a record player and they can see the actual mechanics behind like the spinning disc and the little needle, and then the idea of the vibration and stuff. They take a needle and make a little paper cone on the end and like run it over the grooves and hear the noise. And they're like, oh, I understand those principles, but like this is just a complete magical box.
that
Completely
does everything.
that does everything, but that you can't really learn anything about technology from examining it. You can make it not work very easily. And so I think in some ways it's going to really limit us. How do you create that society of engineers and inventors and people who understand technology by giving them magic? You don't. You just make the world more mysterious to them.
That's interesting. That's an interesting way. So I don't think I would ever think to describe the world as getting more mysterious. I would think opposite. As we know more information, share more information, know more about different corners of the world. But I guess from the view of technology, yeah, it's kind of the opposite, right? And I think
I was just going to say, do we know more? I mean, we're getting fed more and more information, but we're learning to doubt more and more. We see how information is manipulated, and we learn to doubt everything. And that's impossible for you to know. How could you know this? My truth is something different than your truth. In some ways we know less, and in some ways it's about whoever has the biggest microphone. And we're not actually.
Right now it's you, so. This is awkward. Right now it's you, so.
Oh, me?
Bigger microphone.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. I always tend to feel like the whole how everything's designed around an algorithm to keep you watching as long as you can is what siphons us into all these different little sectors, right? You click on this thing, so you're fed all this, and somebody else clicks on another thing. So like everybody's realities and news is like totally different, and it's just like we're all living in different spaces.
Yeah. I mean, you could almost create a situation where you could turn one group against another group, and neither one of them saw them A as in a group, and then B didn't even know the other group was a group, and then had no reason to dislike the group. But suddenly, you've fed them enough information, and you've gone about taking, binding these people into a group to actually throw them against a different group.
Do you see that getting better? Do you see us coming up with some way or some incentive or some correction where people get filtered less into these little tunnels?
I don't know. I mean, NASA in 2019 announced that they were going to go to the moon by the end of 2024. It's all over NASA.gov. It's all over their social media accounts. It was even mentioned in the State of Union multiple times. It's mentioned in like the press release or the press conference when Biden, within a few months of Biden taking office. And, we did a test flight of SLS and Orion. We chose a crew and all this. And even here in Webster and League City, you go walk on the street and say, hey, did you know that NASA's planning to send astronauts back to the moon? They say, no, we have no clue. And they're like, it's a shame we shut down the space program and all this other good stuff, right? And that's here.
Yeah.
Back in, 1969, I mean, it's going to be amazing. We will probably go to the moon, and a good portion of the world and even the United States will probably have no clue that we went.
You think?
Absolutely. It's just gonna, it's like so below. I think a lot of it's the way we get the news. Back in 1969, whenever we first went to the moon, you had 3 major network television stations. You had 1 or 2 major newspapers in each city, a few national magazines. And if you were in all of those, everybody knew about you. But there is nothing to be in now.
Yeah.
There is, I mean, we don't have a common view on what's happening. We have no common, we don't even have a common starting point. Everybody's working with whatever they want to work with.
Yeah.
So I see it's getting worse. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. I wonder about that sometimes because I have one of the original New York Times newspapers from the moon landing, and it's interesting to see every single page be about the moon landing or reactions to the moon landing or discussions on what comes after the moon landing. Like the entire thing is coverage. And I imagine it won't be like that for the next one, but I do think that there'll be a lot of eyes on it, and I feel like it's those kind of accomplishments or bad things that get all the press, right? Everybody knows there's a Boeing spacecraft on the ISS right now, and then, like it's all the negative headlines and this and that. I feel like, people tend to latch on to the negative or the perceived negative or whatever. I hope the moon landing does better. Is also something that's out there, but you're right. Like we circled the moon, and yeah. I don't know many people that know that's even a thing. They're like, what? Or when are we going to go back to moon? And, why don't we have a moon rocket? It's like, yeah, we do. We launched it. So, yeah, it's kind of sad.
Yeah. I had a thought. Maybe it'll come back to me. Okay.
You're drawing too much, yeah. Yeah, I wonder how much of that is like the marketing of it too, right? Like with SpaceX, they had all when they were developing their Falcon 9, look at a rocket exploding and just posting these videos of rocket going boom, and nobody had ever really done that, right? They made it interesting and fun, and I wonder if some of that needs to get out of the old ways of pushing that information, make it interesting, fun, engaging, rather than the same old like kind of press release and silly thing, and we can flip upside down in microgravity over and over for the last like 20 years.
Yeah, I think whenever everyday people can travel into space and it becomes realistic for people to hope to go into space, then they'll see the point, right? It's like, I don't see any point in sending professional astronauts. It's probably the point of view that a lot of people have. But, just go back to, if we go to the moon, will people know about it? Do you remember back whenever Obama announced that he was canceling the Constellation program and instead was going to do the asteroid redirect mission?
Yeah.
And one of the things he said was, we've already been to the moon. Buzz has already done that. So we're going to go do something different now. I think you're going to have two significant reactions of us going to the moon. A group of people still don't believe that we actually went. And then a whole bunch of people are like, so what? We already been there. What's this? So I don't think it's going to drive much excitement, actually.
Interesting. Do you think any of the different ways we are doing it, whether it's, first of all, hopefully we have a much higher def camera, and then bringing first woman, first person of color, do you think that will help to drive engagement, interest?
I've asked people, I've asked women, in fact, what do you think about us sending the first woman back to Met? A lot of people are like, wow, about time, that's great. Some people have, responded back, the best person should go or something like that. I think those first are important in some respect, but I think it's very important that we get past them quickly, and people don't think about women or, people of various races going to the moon just because so many of them are going. It's just like having a woman Secretary of State right now is really no big deal, right? We've had 4 or 5 women Secretary of States, but whenever Madeleine Albright was Secretary of State, she's the first one. That was a big deal.
Yeah,
it's not a big deal anymore. So I hope we get to that point. It's
going to be so common that it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah. I mean, and also that can't be our reason for going, for that very reason that once you've achieved it, they're like, great, now we'll cancel the program.
Yeah,
you did it.
We did the things we said.
We did a woman on the moon. Yes. So.
Yeah. I wanted to go back to your point about more people flying and that feeling more accessible, and then people seeming to care. I found that to be an interesting thing where, kind of growing up and being a NASA fan, people would say like, we're wasting money on this, or we have other problems. We shouldn't be putting all this money and going into space. And then the moment there were commercial companies doing it and it was for profit, I saw a lot of people go, well, I like when NASA does it, but when these people are doing it, they're just sounding billionaires. This is so dumb and this is a waste. And like, there was a sudden shift towards like government spending in space is suddenly awesome, right? Because this is bad. And I found that interesting, but a little disappointing. It was like, where were you before? Like, if we put money in here, we don't have to push, they don't have to push the commercial stuff as much. They may still decide to, but but it was interesting. It was like government efforts were bad until there were all the commercial things. Now these are better. And
It's really funny. People talk about government efforts, right? I mean, it's not like the government went out and hired a whole bunch of engineers and technicians and built rockets. Instead, they allocated a bunch of money to contractors and subcontractors who did it, and those are commercial entities as well. So I'm always been, kind of mystified about why that's characterized as more government than the commercial thing. It just seems like the thing that we're really talking about is cost plus contracts versus fixed price contracts. Cost plus contracts, which incentivize commercial groups to just milk the government for as much as they can and produce as little as they can, as opposed to fixed price contracts, which are, try to spend as little as you can and deliver as within inside the minimum amount required to meet that contract.
I think your average person isn't aware of contracts or who's doing this, that, or even that. A lot of commercial companies are starting with just government funding that would be going to any other different kind of contractor. It's probably just a lack of insight, I would imagine.
Yeah,
and to some degree.
And that's pretty much true, I guess, throughout the government. Like aircraft carriers aren't built by the Navy; they're built by private companies. The Navy then operates them.
Yeah,
but so it's not too much different, I suppose. But it's just kind of interesting in what we call government versus commercial.
Well, I guess the difference here too, right, is like traditionally it's like, all these companies are working on whatever, the space shuttle or the station, and the government is then operating that, and they're the sole operators, right? But now we have this new thing where we're giving money to a company, they develop say Falcon and Dragon rocket to send astronauts to ISS, but then they're using it for their own purpose, right? And they're flying whoever they want and doing their own thing. That's kind of the new piece, right? I think that's what people see. It's like the famous person who's doing all this kinds of crazy stuff and also sending people to space, and also it certainly feels like a totally separate entity.
Yeah, for sure, definitely a total sovereignty. entity. And a lot of people who express sort of reservations about a private billionaire sending people to space probably don't bat an eye about his $100 million mansion or his $1 billion yacht or
right.
All these other things that they spend money on. It's like it's back to that kind of quote, if the government wastes so much money, might as well do it on something inspirational. Billionaires waste so much money too. They might as well do it on something inspirational as well.
Yeah.
So I kind of.
Well, I think one of the really positive examples of that for me was Inspiration 4. Jared Isaacman buying, whatever it was, 4 seats, and then basically giving them away in a variety of forms and taking, regular people up with them. That I thought was quite interesting, especially opening the door to people who otherwise wouldn't be able to become astronauts in any sort of traditional government program that had higher, or more specific health requirements or things that would weed you out. I actually found that quite hopeful.
Yeah, that kind of touches on something else that we got prepared for. We are going to have some space fatalities as we send people who are not the fittest out further and in space with maybe not as much support as they used to have. And it's going to be interesting to see sort of how people react to that. And a lot of it has to do with volume. We have plane fatalities still in the recent era, but everybody still flies.
Yeah.
Regardless, we even have planes where, the walls just disappear.
Oh no! I have no idea what you're talking about. It seems ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. It's not seems ridiculous. You don't need to be talk like an executive from one of these companies going, "Whoa, that seems ridiculous." If it were to actually have happened.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, but if we send like millions of people to space and 1 or 2 of them die, that's going to be a very different situation than we spend a few dozen and you have 1 or 2.
Yeah.
So
sure.
I
think it'll be a shock the first time somebody dies on a purely commercial for fun flight or whatever. Something that's just a company doing it.
Sure.
And it's
Yeah.
probably inevitable, but it's just
And,
it'll be interesting to see how people react to that.
and back to the military roots of the space program, you know, being a soldier is a high risk environment. You expect to be in fatal situations, and so
Right.
kind of like moving over into the space program and being in less fatal situations is actually an improvement. But for
to circle back to Countdown to the Moon, have you ever felt like you were in a fatal situation going in,
like interviewing asking
yeah.
somebody, I think I was at the airport. I interviewed a guy by the name of Jonah. I think that was probably the most intense interview I ever had. He was very anti-NASA, very conspiracy theorist. He was like, the government lies to us, and just can't believe anything that they say, and all these other things. And he wasn't only just saying these like in a calm, philosophical, laid back way, but in like a forward leaning, visibly shaking type of emotional way. Like this was some type of deep frustration that he had, that he could see the truth and he was frustrated that nobody else could see it, and that people would think that they would be so willingly blinded by this. And you were talking about how you go to YouTube and you get drilled down this whole series of things. I mean, what is truth whenever you can find backing for any point of view? And the more sensational the point of view, the more visibility it gets. And then people react to that visibility by creating other stuff. That's amazing. Thank you so much. The producer here is really amazing.
Should give her a raise.
Absolutely. Should give her a chair.
Sorry, Chloe. We're almost done. That's interesting. I definitely remember that interview. Watching that interview, and yeah, you could see him just shaking in total anger. Sounds like you've had a few people that have not believed in the moon landing.
Yeah,
which is interesting, and I like you. You seem to meet them with a neutral energy, which I appreciate. Kind of go, okay. Sometimes you'll throw in, well, we have been, or whatever, like a slight correction. And then when they push back, you just kind of ask your next question and you go on. Seems to work well in terms of not.
Yeah, I think it's very easy to look at those interviews and wonder, do I agree with them? That's always like the challenge here is like, how do you become invisible and leave space for them to express their opinion, stimulate them to kind of bring forth more of themselves without necessarily having their views and opinions get projected onto you. And then at the same token, during that experience, trying to be friendly. Yeah. You don't want to be like, ooh, sorry.
Right, never mind. I can find somebody else. Do you have you found any ones on the opposite side of that spectrum that are particularly hopeful that stand on your mind?
I've had a lot of hopeful interviews. A guy runs this charter school, and he's really focused on creating generations of problem solvers and people who go out there and look at society's problems. I think it's really amazing, actually. I'm take a sidetrack here. How we take so much brains and labor and everything and stick it in a classroom and say that the best you could do is sit there and not cause a problem and come up with the same answer as in the back of the book. We should take society's problems and use our elementary, middle school, and high school and college to solve those problems. And then that way, these people are actually contributing to society, and their studies are being generated by real needs. We teach math as like this arbitrary, random intellectual exercise, like I don't know, some type of random art like thread sorting. It's like, why would you do that? Well, if you're a seamstress, maybe it's important. I don't know. But math could be really useful to solve certain problems, and you're going to be confronted with these problems in life. It's going to be stuff like, how are you going to figure out how much paint you need to do to paint a fence? Well, you have so many fences that need to be painted. Why don't we go and talk about ways to estimate that, get that much paint, see if it works, and talk about why we're over and under and how much. It's like there's no reason why kids couldn't actually contribute. I think everything in the school should be done by the kids. Like older kids should teach younger kids. Kids should prepare the food, clean it, do the maintenance. They should drive the buses and pick up the other kids. And, like early on, it's like as much responsibility as you give them, as opposed to treating them like people that are unworthy or unable to bear responsibility. I mean, it's like, if you look at our system, essentially we keep people in this infant state until they graduate from high school, and then we just toss it out in the world and we're like, survive, live. It's like, we should be making people that are strong, integrated into society from an early age. Having them work on group projects and come up with rules as a group, and trying to figure out how to both respect and also move the group forward and that type of thing. So anyway, I think that could change a lot. We should make that happen.
Of course, I picture a 9-year-old driving a bus immediately, just like plowing through things. It's like, I can't hit the pedals, just. No, but I like what you're saying, like more of that apprenticeship type. And this doesn't really have to do with the elementary and young school age, but it made me think of International Space University, ISU. That was the original thought behind it, was that you'd have astronauts actually teaching kind of like the next group of astronauts, and it would be more of like this apprentice learning to be the next set of like space explorers from different countries. Now it's more like a normal traditional university in some ways, still pretty oddball. But that was the thought of the original inception, was that all of the instructors were going to be astronauts, teaching people who wanted to become astronauts and learning through their experiences, which I thought was very cool. And I could see coming back as we have more and more opportunities to fly and different ways to fly, that you'd have this kind of setup of, previous people who were crazy enough to get on rockets, teaching others the ropes. I like that thought. I like that idea of that. But,
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you come out of school with a whole bunch of skills. You can repair light bulbs, and you can clean stuff, and you can prepare food, and you can teach things. And, it's like, why not?
I think for a lot of people, it makes it easier to stay engaged too, right? Like I went to a technical school, and we had a setup where you would pick a vocation, right? So whether it was automotive or electronics or electrical or cosmetology, whatever it was, and you would do, the more you progress, the more time you spend in that. So by your senior year, you were doing one whole week, you're only doing whatever your trade is, and the other week you're doing academics. And I always liked that, because it was, first of all, like you had a stronger community with the people that you were with all the time. And you weren't just sitting there listening to someone and doing that kind of traditional, I'm going to tell you a bunch of stuff and then give you homework, and we're just going to do this over and over. It was more active, more integrated, I guess.
Yeah, and plus imagine the class sizes you get to. I mean, if you have like older students teaching younger students, I mean, you can have like a 1-to-4 ratio. I mean, really. And you have like the regular teachers kind of overseeing it, and maybe doing like the testing and then being more consulting.
Yeah, I would hope you'd have some people overseeing it, because I would not want to be taught by a lot of my peers in high school, for sure.
That's because they had no skills in teaching, because they didn't have experience.
Yeah, true. Yeah,
and they didn't have the expectation either.
Yeah.
They didn't know what was going to, that it's like, they didn't have any skin in the game.
Yeah.
How would it behave differently if they were a critical component?
Right.
People rise to what's expected out of them.
I've heard we don't rise to the occasion, we fall back on our training.
That's true. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you for sitting down and chatting with me
fun.
about Countdown to the Moon, and also we like talking space, and I feel like we always have really interesting conversations about that. So it's always a joy to kind of pick your brain a little bit and kind of understand what's swimming up there.
Well,
And,
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries. And good luck with the next 180,
150.
150 days of Countdown to the Moon.
Yeah.
I look forward to
And
seeing them.
technically, it's really 145, and I just have to do 5 on the last day, but that's okay.
Fair enough. And then you're going to extend this, right? You're thinking about extending this to 2026?
I think you already know the answer. You're just trying to get underneath my skin. I
just
see how
messing
that
with
is. Yeah, no. What I do plan to do, it's something I've been wanting to do, is they have this meditation camp where you go for 10 days and you don't talk and you meditate for 10 days. And I've been really wanting to do that for like a long time. I had coworkers that used to do that.
Can't do that
so
with
like,
us.
exactly, I couldn't do this as a project. So I hoping to do that in the first part of next year. Kind of
Gotcha.
like go and dig deep within myself and see if anything's there.
Could do it with cue cards, see if anything's there. Do it with cue cards, just hold up.
Yeah.
Got this project.
Well, it's not just not talking; it's also not communicating. So that's like the thing. Introspection.
Got it. Oh, there was one last thing I wanted to ask you. Any hopes for what happens with these interviews in the future?
Yeah. So my thought is I'm going to let it sit for a few years and maybe come back and listen to them, and then at that point maybe put together a summary or overview or something like that. But I definitely want to let them sit and age for a while and kind of let a little time pass, get a little bit a distance from it, and then come back and see them.
Nice little retrospective. It'll also be interesting if by the time we come back, we've already gone back to them. Then.
In fact, I might wait to actually watch them until after we go back to them. So that could be a couple of years, could be decades.
Oh no. Hopefully more a couple of years than decade. But
I hope so too. That's where my money is.
Sweet. Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely, Brian. Anytime. Thank you so much, Chloe. That was a lot of fun. And I really appreciate the water. That was like good. You almost extended it though for a whole another 2 hours by that though.
If you enjoyed this interview, go ahead and check out GadgetNate's Countdown to the Moon project on YouTube. I'll add the link to the description. All right, attempt number 2. Looks like attempt number 2 was successful.
Yep, it worked out. I found a fellow NASA person too.
That's awesome.
That was awesome. Not only making connections, but connections at work and connections that work outside of work.
There you go. Never stop working.
Never stop working.